I think the point is that, we were kind of in a supply side recession, and now by raising rates to some crazy amount, the end of which we're still not sure about, may actually then trigger the demand destruction to have a demand side recession. And so I don't know that we've lived in a modern point in time where both things have been true, right? There's been a principle of macroeconomics that everybody's always kind of debating, is this a supply side issue? Is it a demand side issue? We know that in COVID, it was a supply side issue. We took all the supply out of the market. And now we're trying to figure out, when we exhaust, all of the money we've given people, and we destroy demand and take the incentives for demand to go away, right? Consumer confidence is now starting to turn. What happens then? Well, we're going to figure that out in the next 6 or 9 months. But the thing is, you have both that are true. It's not as if the supply side of the economy has been fixed. It's not as if everybody is running at 100% capacity. It's not as if all the supply chain issues have been worked out. If you take a big step back to the day before the lockdowns started, we had a normal functioning economy that was growing by, call it, 2% a year. And the minute that we enforced these lockdowns, I actually think what we did was we started a supply side recession. It's what Sachs said earlier. So what does that mean? Let's just say you're a factory and you make wheels. Okay, just make something really simple. You were growing at 2% a year. Everything seemed hunky-dory. You had employees. It was fine. You used to sell your products, make 10, 15% profits. Everything was fine. And then the day after, the government said, you need to shut your factory down because we can't have people spending too much time close together because we need to get a handle on this pandemic. Okay, so you shut it down. And then for the next 12 or 18 months, what happens? That stuff sits idle. These people that used to work for you get $2.5 trillion put into their bank accounts. They spend their time doing other things. And then all of a sudden people say, okay, it's time to start the factory up again. People want to buy wheels. And now all of a sudden you find that because everything all around the world was shut down, there's no rubber to make the wheels. There's no steel to make the axle. There's no people to put them all together. And so what happens? Well, prices go up because, again, you gave everybody else $2.5 trillion. So they're like, well, I used to pay $1 for your wheel. I'm willing to pay you $2 now. Just make the wheel. Give it to me before you give it to somebody else. So that is like the classic definition of a supply side recession. I do think that people are anxious to reestablish some amount of normalcy. And this is really the first summer where everybody writ large can be out and do the things that they were planning on doing.
Last year was the head fake summer, yeah.
Last year was a little bit of a head fake. And look, you have 2 years of pent up plans of, weddings. 50th anniversaries and weddings and all of this stuff that's happening. Yeah. And so I think people are really spending money. Let me maybe tie a couple of these things together because I tend to agree with you. Like, I think that we have been in a supply side recession. That is what has caused inflation. We have to go through a process of taking all the excess money that's been put in out. And when you do that, we will destroy demand. And then that'll trigger a demand side recession because people will
destroy asset values.
And we will destroy asset values. So
we started that process. Asset values went real quick. Yeah.
That will happen second.
So the balance sheets of that segment of the population that is overspending right now, once their balance sheets really take the hit and they take a hard look at what their savings are, they're going to cut spending.
Right. Yeah, but the point is, I think we're still firmly in that first phase. And I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but the reason why I think that we're still in the first part of this process is because people, broadly speaking, still have a lot of savings because of all the stimulus checks. There is still a lot of money. So how will we know, maybe is the better point, when all of that excess savings has been, torn away from these people because of high prices? I suspect it's when Jason's first chart starts to close, right? So when people are, they're more motivated to re-enter the workforce. I think that's a signal. Freeberg, your signal is another one, which is when credit delinquencies really start to spike. It's because people then, tapped out their savings, then they tap their credit cards, and then all of a sudden they become delinquent. When all of those things happen, you're probably now at a point where that first phase of the supply side issues are largely done, and now you get to the demand destruction. But all of those roads, unfortunately, lead to the same conclusion, which is like, equities get really under pressure. There is no scenario where there's a bid to equities. Why would you buy something that has lower earnings in the future Or why would you buy something that has a lower discount rate for profits in the future? In this case, both are true. Every time the market rallied, oddly, Facebook would be stagnant or trade off. And, when I called people on Wall Street, what they said was because, we think this is the company that has the most pressure on earnings. I don't know if that's true or not, but they took every opportunity in rallies to trim their position in Facebook. Now, if that's true, you have to remind yourself that is one of the 10 best companies in the entire world. And so if you're going to go and question the earnings power of one of the 10 best companies in the world, you may want to consider the earnings power of every other company that's not Facebook. There's no reason why the Dutch government had to go and basically put thousands of farmers out of business. Instead, what they could have done is actually created the tax incentive that allowed farmers to adopt some of these bleeding edge technologies when they were probably too expensive to make it economically equivalent. I mean, by the way, that is not a newfangled idea. This is not genius talk here. The reason why they don't do the obvious simple thing is class bias. It is exactly what David said. It is the influence of people who look down on these people. Okay. And who believe that they are more virtuous because of their desire to defend climate change.
There's also a pragmatic piece of this. This reminds me of the coal debates we had. There are 62,000 coal miners in this country. Like, this is a small number of people who were impacted. We could just, basically give them severance and a soft landing instead of this craziness.
Or let them continue to do their job and egress off naturally. The economic free market will manage it on its own. And instead, what you could do is actually green light nuclear, subsidize some of these more adventurous ways in which you can extract and refine LNG. But my point is, this is where it's a real head scratcher why politicians don't do this. And I think the only thing that I can come up with is that they are overly influenced by these cultural elites with their perspectives.
I agree.
That do judge very harshly what they believe to be right and what they believe to be wrong. According to the ESG rules that these folks have passed, this qualifies as an ESG fund because he doesn't own weapons, porn, and oil sands. But it allows all these people to walk around thinking that their investments are tied up in things that are actually clean.
Absurd.
It's not true. So the point is that there are these structural lies that have been baked into the system that they are supported by very shoddy accounting or rules or science. And if we're really going to fix this problem, I think you have to go and inspect these things and call them out. But like all of this ESG investing, which perpetuates, by the way, perhaps, why these governments just have no clue what's going on, sit on top of all of these lies. There's nothing ESG about Conoco and Exxon per se.
It's ridiculous.
Let's just call it for what it is. This guy's a good fund manager.